When we think of vanity, what do we typically think about? Maybe we think about a person who wears tons of makeup and really fixes their hair a lot and has the most expensive car, the most expensive fashion, the most expensive house. Maybe we think of that as vanity. But what about the underdog? What about maybe the blue-collar man or woman who's working for their family and just trying to provide all they can? Maybe they have a car that's 20 years old. Maybe their house is small and pretty old. Would you consider them vain? Who would you think is more vain? Truthfully, I know my own biases. I would probably think of this woman who had the big hair and all the makeup and the house and the car and the latest fashion. But the truth is, vanity is not really what you think it is. Vanity has really nothing to do with those things, and it's all about your heart and your attitude and your mind. I have been studying in the book of Ecclesiastes. I've mentioned that on the channel recently, and I have learned so much. It's made me think so hard, and it's absolutely broke some of those molds kind of society in my mind. So it's something that I want to share with you. So a quick rundown of the book of Ecclesiastes, if you've never read it, or maybe you have read it. It seems very depressing at first. This is a book that Solomon has wrote, and it seems very depressing. It's about life is vain and meaningless, but it's really a wonderful book to study because you kind of have to take it in perspective. It's about getting our priorities right. And the single purpose of that book is knowing God and knowing that no matter how hard life is or how unfair life is, that God is still what is most important. And specifically, when we think about purpose and meaning in our life, that comes from God alone and not our human endeavors. And that is a huge facet of this book. And also the book talks about we can acknowledge that there is evil and unfairness in the world, because there absolutely is, but we still need to maintain a positive attitude and a strong faith. And then the book also greatly emphasizes living for God, of course. And so a few facets of that are specific to this book are that our human effort apart from God is pointless. Anything that we try to do apart from God is pointless. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into this. Another facet of this book is to put God first now, right here, right now, in the present. Receiving every good gift as a gift from God. That's a huge thing about this book. Two other ways that are highlighted in the Ecclesiastes, how God wants us to live, is that God is going to judge not only evil but good. We're all going to have to kind of be accountable for our actions. And I like what the NLT Bible said. It said, how strange that people spend their lives striving for the very enjoyment that God gives freely. I think that that's a kind of just a great summation sentence of this book. So what attitudes and motives would constitute vanity? I've got about 9 verses that I want to share. So if you've read the Ecclesiastes before, or even if you haven't, the book does talk a lot about vanity, but it mentions this one phrase over and over, and it says vanity and vexation of spirit. And that really stuck out to me because that sounds very serious, and I wanted to dive more into that specifically in this book. So when we think about vanity, like I said before, do we think of the woman in the big hair and the fancy purse and the car and the expensive home? Or do we think of maybe this underdog who's just putting so much emphasis on the work, trying to get ahead for their family? Vanity is excessive pride and obsession of appearance or accomplishments. When you really boil it down, I mean, the underdog, the person, the blue-collar person who's really working hard for their family could at the end of the day be just as vain as the woman with the big hair and the fancy purse and the car, right? I mean, I think it's a heart attitude. And it's not just obsession about our appearance, but it can be obsession over accomplishments, our career, our success. Then, what about vexation? Vexation is a state of being annoyed, frustrated, or worried in your spirit. These are all things that would vex your spirit, so to speak. That sounds super serious, right? I mean, and it is. So that's anything that's making your spirit, your heart, your mind feel annoyed, frustrated, or worried. Reading Ecclesiastes has given me a lot of conviction. If I'm being completely honest, it's made me realize that I'm definitely vain in a lot of ways. And I think that everyone truthfully is vain in some way. I think it's just part of human nature, but that's why it's good to study these things, because even if that is sort of part of human nature, it doesn't mean that we just have to accept it and decide that, well, I'm just a little bit vain, but that's okay. So I want to break it down by chapter, and I want to go chapter by chapter of all the chapters that mentioned vanity and vexation. So the first one is chapter 1. And so the verses that mentioned vanity and vexation is verse 14 and verse 17. So Ecclesiastes 1:14 says, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. So anytime under the sun is mentioned in the book of Ecclesiastes, because it's mentioned a lot, under the sun just basically means like here on earth. Under the sun, anything that's taken place on earth. And verse 17, and I gave my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also vexation of spirit. So Solomon discovered in all his great wisdom that the wisdom he had did not provide the satisfaction that he was seeking. So Solomon was wise, he was a king, he had God's favor, he had, just pretty much anything he wanted at his disposal. And so that's why this book is so significant, because this is coming from someone who had everything, who had it all. But out of everything he had and all the wisdom that he tried to find, it didn't provide satisfaction, because he could have this wisdom, he could analyze his problems, but he had no way to solve them. And how often do we do this? Whether we're seeking wisdom, we're seeking knowledge, we're seeking anything else. And that's why I think vanity is not what we think it is. It goes way deeper than that, because we search for these things just like Solomon did, and we become so easily dissatisfied, and we think, well, when I get this, and this, I'll be happy. When I get to this stage of life, I'll be happy. But the truth is, we cannot be happy apart from God. So let's look at chapter 2, verse 11, 17, and 26. Verse 11 says, Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. That is pretty depressing, honestly. But he was saying that he felt like his accomplishments were pointless, that he had worked and done all this labor, all of these things, and it was just completely pointless. Let's look at verse 17. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. So he's saying he hated life, that he was bitter because his efforts that he talked about there in verse 11 were just absolutely pointless. And then in verse 26, he says, For God giveth to man that is good in his sight, wisdom, and knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. So it's worth noting in verse 24, just 2 verses before 26, Solomon kind of decides, well, okay, the answer to hating my life and my accomplishments being pointless is I should just eat, drink, and be merry. Then in verse 26, not 2 verses later, it's right back to everything is meaningless. So what is going on here? What can we learn from this? His attempts at finding life's meaning were just not working. How often does that happen for us? Again, we think, if I just get this, and this, I'll be happy. And maybe you don't even have that internal thought process, but you just find yourself feeling restless and unhappy in life. I think that happens to all of us at some point. His great accomplishments were only temporary. When we gain success in life, we level up at our career, or maybe, okay, I really want to get this new car, or I want a bigger house. Those accomplishments, that feeling that you get from that is only temporary, and then it's on to the next thing. And that's because security and self-worth are found in God alone. The security and self-worth that you have cannot be found or measured in your accomplishments, in your possessions, in your career, your level at your job. That can't come from that. The security and self-worth that we all need as humans can only come from God alone. Again, Solomon had it all. He had everything, and he ended up hating his life. Have you ever met someone like that, who it just seemed like they had everything, but somehow they were so unhappy? Don't miss this. This is one of the biggest things I learned from the book of Ecclesiastes. His accomplishments that he was trying to pursue did not satisfy him because he pursued them for his personal satisfaction alone. That was his end goal, was just personal satisfaction. And again, I think back to my life, I think back to just people in general. If we're just pursuing things to personally satisfy us, it's a means to an end. It's never going to work, because true contentment can only come from serving God and serving others. When we work for others and we work for God, it fills us up because it takes the attention and the importance off ourselves. If it's only all about us and what we can gain and what we can accomplish, that will always leave you feeling empty. And when you think about that from a standpoint of vanity, I think we're all guilty of that. I know that I definitely am. And then lastly, a takeaway from these verses is that happiness is in the here and now and what God has given us. A huge part of vanity is just looking out into the future and wanting more and more and more, and just not being happy with what you have in the right here and the right now. So let's look at chapter 4. We've got 3 verses, 4, 6, and 16. So Ecclesiastes 4:4. Again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his labor. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. Wow, this is a big one. This is definitely where I felt some conviction. Being jealous of other people's success is vain, and it's vexing to your spirit, and it's pointless. But it's so easy to look around at your neighbor, and especially with social media. Oh my goodness. You not only can compare yourself to maybe your few neighbors next door, or a few people in your community, you can compare yourself to the whole entire world from a device in your pocket. It's mind-blowing, but it is so dangerous. Social media just absolutely wrecks people's mental health. And I'm not saying there's not great things about it. Obviously, here I am making a video on YouTube. But it's something definitely to be aware of. And then we've got verse 6. Better is a handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit. This was probably one of my favorite verses from this whole book of Ecclesiastes. It is better to have little and do little and have a peaceful spirit than it is to have a ton but have a vexed spirit, where you're frustrated and you're worried and you're anxious. Wow, when you think about that alone, you could just sit and pray over that verse and think about that for a long time, because in the world it's all about get more and be better and be faster, and the world encourages us to have 2 handfuls of just anything and everything at any moment, and if we don't, then we're missing out. But when you have those 2 handfuls, you can't hold on to anything else but what you've got, and that often causes your spirit to be very vexed. So let's look at verse 16 of chapter 4 here. There is no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this is also vanity and vexation of spirit. Seek God's approval, not man. Men are going to come and go, and this time that Solomon is writing, kings are going to come and go, and you might be a great king, but 10 years later, are people really going to be thinking about you every single day? And I know that sounds harsh, but we need to be seeking God's approval and not man's approval, because we're all going back to the dust one way or another from where we came from. A huge place that vanity lies is being jealous of other people's success. But here's why that is so damaging. Because God gives each one of us different talents, different abilities, different opportunities. We live in different places. We're all different people. And so we need to enjoy what God has given us. You can't enjoy what God has given someone else. And if you try to do that and you don't enjoy what God has given you, then that makes your life miserable. God gives out accomplishments and rewards, not us. And again, it's so much better to live life peacefully with just a little bit than it is to have it all but have a super hectic life. Do you ever see the people who seem to have it all? They have the house and the fancy car and the career and the 2.5 kids and a couple dogs, and you're like, wow, they just have it all. But do they have it all? You don't know what that's costing them inward. You don't know if they have inward peace or if they are just an absolute wreck. I like what the NLT Bible had to say about verse 16. Position, popularity, prestige are poor life goals. People are fickle and life changes. And it's true. And it's just hardwired into us by the world. We want position and popularity and prestige. And that is just so not the message of Jesus Christ. The message of Jesus is to be humble and to be meek and to be lowly. And that's not always fun. That goes against our flesh. All right, let's look at chapter 6, verse 9. This is our last verse here. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wondering of the desire. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. Enjoy what you have today right here in front of you with both of your eyes. That verse says, let's read it again. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wondering of the desire. Sight of your eyes is what you can see right here, right now, than the wondering of the desire. It's so easy for all of us, gosh, me for sure, to look around and think, well, I want that, or someday maybe I'll have that. And you're just wondering all the time. And I mean, your mind is, instead of looking at what's right here in front of you. And oftentimes when you shift that perspective and you look at what's right in front of you, your mind is blown and you're just thinking, wow, God, I mean, the fact that I can walk and breathe and hear and everything is just huge. It's a major blessing. None of that is promised to us. But that's like a safeguard against having that restless spirit, against vanity, is when we focus on what we can see with our own two eyes right here, right now. That makes things so much better and more enjoyable. Vanity is in our very hearts, minds, and attitudes, and none of us are exempt from it. Reading this book, reading Ecclesiastes has been awesome, and if you've never read the book of Ecclesiastes, it's just 12 chapters. I highly suggest that you read it. It's just opened my eyes in so many different ways. And it's challenged me to look at my attitudes and look at my motives and search out vanity and find that a lot of the times I'm, pursuing success for my personal satisfaction and not God's, or not serving other people. And sometimes it's hard to maybe figure out in the job that you're in or the season of life that you're in, well, how do I serve God? How do I serve other people? How do I pursue God's mission instead of my own mission? Maybe you work at a fast food restaurant. Maybe you work at a bank. Maybe you work, customer service, or you work construction or anything. And you think, well, how can I spread God's word, or how can I line my purpose up for God's purpose? And I think the answer to that oftentimes is so much more simple than we think. And that is just being a shining light for God. So wherever you go and whoever you interact with, being nice to them, who's listening, making sure that you're not saying things that you shouldn't be saying, making sure that you have a good attitude. And that goes so far, and that rubs off on people so much more than you think it does. I think we have to be very careful to safeguard against vanity, because I think, again, vanity is programmed into us by the world. I know for me, I'm 27 years old at the time of filming this video. I remember being in high school and really middle school. In middle school, it was all about, you've got to do good in high school so you can do good in college. And in high school, it was all about college, because if you did not get a good degree, then you wouldn't have a good life. Then you couldn't have the nice car, the nice house, the nice family. You couldn't afford to have a nice life if you didn't have that college degree. And that was, at least at the schools that I went to, that was programmed into me. And then years later in my adulthood, I'm realizing, that's not necessarily true. And a lot of that is trying to seek meaning and purpose from life apart from God. And that's just not true. And that's just one of the many ways that the world programs this vanity into us. Lastly, as I wrap up this video, 2 huge things is vanity is not what we think it is. It seeps in different ways in different places than what we think. And the reason that is so dangerous is because that vanity is what makes us have this vexed spirit. That's what makes us feel frustrated and worried and annoyed all the time. And that's what makes us feel restless. That's what makes life feel meaningless. If you're spinning your wheels and you're doing your best and you're thinking, what in the world is going on? I'm doing my best to live for God. Why does life feel so meaningless? And then lastly, the other importance of this is because this brings relief. This is like a lifeboat. It saves us from ourselves. It takes the pressure off of us. We can enjoy what God has given us right here, right now, today, and stop striving for more. This is almost like a get out of jail free card. Like, mind your own business. Just look at what you can see right in front of you. Do your best to serve God and serve other people, and make sure that you don't have any of this vanity in your heart, and then, you're good to go. That's one reason why I've loved reading this book. It's been just a relief. It's pointed out the nasty negative parts of me, which is never fun for anyone to look inwardly and be like, I got some cleaning up here to do. But it really does bring relief when we know all we have to do is just seek God and seek His mission, and then that's when we will feel the purpose and the meaning. So I hope that you got something from this video. I love sharing videos like this. Just God blesses me so much, and His word is just, oh my goodness, it's just absolute everything. I mean, you can't live life without it. And if there's anything that I can share from what I'm learning that could benefit someone else, then I want to. So drop me a comment and let me know what you think. As always, thank you for watching. God bless you, God keep you, and I will see you on the next video.